Leif and I are discussing some of our favorite unique wings. Who do we like the most? What makes them so unique? Coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board. We are getting deeper and deeper into draft season. It is just about May. We are so close, which means it's the combine month. The official list of early entrants is out. We're going to get a lot of this in the coming days, really this week. My name is Richard Stayman. I'm filling in for Rafael Barlowe with Leif Thulin. You might know me better as @Mavs Draft on Twitter. Big shout out to everybody who continues to listen, who has listened through dating back to the offseason right after Summer League when there was nothing throughout the season, the college season, the NBA regular season. If your team was in the playoffs, you just got eliminated. Big shout out to everybody. Really appreciate you guys making this your first listen for months on end, honestly, years since we've started doing this and we took over for Chad Ford. So really appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So, Leif, first of all, what do you think of some of the wings in this class? Just broad overview. What do you think of the wings in this 2024 draft?
It's interesting because they have very differing skill sets. Typically, you kind of have a grouping of like, these are the 3-and-D wings. These are the on-ball facilitator types. Well, I think even the like on-ball type of wings are very different. Like we talked about in a previous episode, Matas Buzelis and Ron Holland could both figure to be guys who are on the ball, and I'd classify both of them as wings, but they do it very differently. Cody Williams is another one that comes to mind, and he's very different than a guy who has similar size and Stephon Castle. And I know we're not talking about some of those guys at the top, but it starts at the top because then it makes differing skill sets more of a commodity later in the draft. And that's kind of who we're talking about today. And I think there's guys that can find roles based off what I've watched in the playoffs. There's a lot of players that are playing that have defined skill sets and are carving out roles on playoff teams. And this is what you're hoping to do in a draft that's quote unquote not very good. But you want to find depth pieces who have niches in the NBA. And I think that a lot of the guys we're trying to talk about today can fit those molds.
Yeah, completely agreed. I mean, we call it the wacky wings for a reason. There's really just these guys are very unique. Just starting off with the first player, Dillon Jones might be the king of this group, right? He's about 6'6", does almost every single thing on the court at a decent to high level. 21 points per game this season, just about 10 rebounds. The last 2 years, he averaged a double-double. He also had 5 assists a game, 2 steals a game, really doesn't block shots, but that kind of goes into the next level, which is he's not very athletic, but he does almost everything else. He shoots the ball. The percentages are really strong. The free throw percentage, there's strong indicators there. What does he look like in the NBA? Because we've seen these guys like David Roddy is a prime example. He was somebody who he's a wing, kind of technically. He's more a forward than a wing, but he had a very weird archetype. But sometimes those guys work, sometimes they don't. I think he's a good one to start with, though, Dillon Jones. What do you think of Dillon?
I'm torn on him because I'll watch him play in a game in the Big Sky Conference tournament, and I'll think to myself, okay, he's clearly the best player out here. Like that doesn't change, but the way he scores makes me think, okay, well, he's better with the ball in his hand, and then he's the best defender in that conference, and I think to myself, well, that's because he's playing inferior competition. Because when I saw him guard at the combine last year, I thought he looked a little bit aloof. Amari Bailey was obviously very quick, and that's his best skill. The best attribute he has, but I can vividly remember them jawing at one another and Amari Bailey winning that battle. And so my level of faith for Dillon Jones hinges more on how well he can carve out a role defensively and then how well he shoots the ball off the ball, because I don't think he's going to be on the ball, and that's what his best attributes are, is he's a sizable guard in college basketball. So I'm a little bit lower on him than I'd say most of the people I see, but I see the appeal because he's got such versatility, and that's why I would consider him a non-conventional wing, like you said.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where pretty much any of these guys were kind of like, how do they scale up? There's not like an easy role. Like Dalton Connect has such an obvious way he scales up. Like all of these different guys that they have the dynamic shooting, but Dylan Jones is a little bit different. Currently, he's ranked 42nd on the consensus board on rookie scale. I have him a little bit lower just because of that athleticism for me. But if he can be a knockdown shooter, I think he easily finds a role in this league. But that's kind of the same thing we said about David Roddy, who jump shot was very iffy, and also he just wasn't nearly as good a decision maker. I think Dylan Jones will definitely latch on somewhere. I just don't know if he's like a starting caliber guy. Like I think he's more a high floor than high upside guy, and I wish he had transferred. So, any other comments you got on Dylan Jones before we move on to the next one?
I think he's going to have to prove a lot of people like, hey, I'm this good at this level against like the players that you're presumably picking next to me or ahead of me, because he's going to have naysayers based on level of competition.
Yeah, and also like he had probably the craziest game of any one prospect this year. He had 30 points, 23 rebounds, and 9 assists in a game. Like it's almost a 30-20-10 game at any level is ridiculous. But like to do it at Weber State may not pop off, but that's just so rare. To do it in college is really tough because you're playing way less minutes. Even if you played all 40 minutes, it's still way fewer possessions. Like that is ridiculously efficient. So I do think his game will scale down well. I just don't know if he ever does he ever end up better than David Roddy? I really don't know. So that's kind of where I'm at. The next guy on the list, this is somebody that you suggested. Actually, I think both of us really like this guy. But Jamir Watkins, give us the rundown on what you like about Jamir and why you put him on here.
I think he's got a lot of that like prototypical went to Florida State appeal. And what I mean by that is he's going to defend. He's going to be a plus athlete at any level of basketball. He's going to hound you full court if you're asked to do that. He'll play with energy, and he's used to not being the man, as they're very egalitarian. Like they've had lottery picks. They've had Scotty Barnes, all-stars in the NBA, come off as the bench as a sixth man when they've come in as big-time freshmen. So they'll know how to he'll know how to play in any given role. And then when you get more specific about what he does well, I think he's a good defender with decent to good ball skills at the NBA level, and they were very good in college basketball as a wing. And that's just rare. That you have someone who's adept with the ball in their hands, can play multiple positions, defends at multiple positions. He went to VCU prior to FSU and had a little bit larger role, but he scaled up well, moving from the A10 to the ACC, scoring 16 points a game, 6 boards, 3 assists. He shot 34% from 3, so I think the question mark and the swing skill would be shooting for him. But I think the defense translates up. I think the athleticism and size for the position translates up, and the better than average ball skills for positional like values. Like I would value the fact that he can dribble the basketball and play multiple positions enough to give him a shot and hope that the shot comes around, because 34% is not bad, especially on a not very good team. So he's a guy that I think is unheralded, but I would take a flyer on in the late first round.
Yeah, I actually agree in this draft. Like he's so funky because he's 6'7". He kind of plays that. Like he almost played, like you said, it was the Florida State appeal, right? Where he played a bunch of different roles. He kind of played power forward, but at the same time, like I thought he was a pretty good decision maker off the dribble, which is one of the most valuable traits you can have for a wing. And that is extremely important. And on top of that, he plays really tough physical defense. Like that is something that's going to get him on an NBA court right away.
Yeah,
The
two
only
two
concern
steals and about a block.
Yeah, like it shows on the stat sheet. Like he makes guys uncomfortable and he forces bad decisions. And that is about as good of a trade, I think, as you can have for a defender coming into the league. But for me, you touched on the shooting. We don't really know. The 3-point percentage was bad, but the free throw percentage has been consistently good. So I do trust that. My only concern about his shot was he has a low release point. So it's not, it's not ideal. Makes him kind of blockable and easily contestable. But on top of that, the shot selection can come and go. And his worst game, which I would say is against Georgia, I went in back and watched. I for those who don't know, I love watching the guy's worst game. Like, I think it tells so much about a prospect that you can see, okay, is it the process? Was it they had 7 shots roll in and out? Was it something like that? Like, I think it tells a lot about a prospect in their game. For him, he just didn't move that much, and he got really uncomfortable with the fact, like, towards the end, the shot selection kept getting worse. So I think that was his ultimate issue. But I do think you can tell a lot. And again, he passed that test because he was still being able to make good decisions generally. He just kind of got in his own head. And that's stuff that's so easily fixable that I think he's going to have consistently good games and thus make the NBA.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think that he's someone that can make enough shots to your defense has to honor a little bit. He can be the dare shooter, but he'll punish you enough to be honored. And then I would say defensively, his versatility, ability to guard 2 through 4 in the NBA shines through more so than his deficiencies as a shooter. And then I would say the extra appeal would be he can pass. And if they give the ball to him in the sense like Terrence Mann played a similar role at Florida State, he was a little more on ball, but they were pretty similar and their statistics were pretty similar. In fact, Watkins were probably slightly better because he was on a worse team. But if you gave him the ball and said, I want you to be a backup ball handler in this lineup and then a primary defender in the other, I could see him carving out a pretty good career doing that in the NBA.
Yeah, completely agree. We're going to keep talking about some of these players. We'll move on to Jaylen Tyson and Ryan Dunn in just a minute. But first, let me tell you about DoorDash. Leif, this might have snuck up on you too, but do you know Mother's Day is coming up in a couple weeks?
Sure do. I'm leaving for the combine, so I got to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, same boat. So that's why actually both of us we'll be at the combine, getting there like at the exact same time and everything. And that's why, since we won't be able to be with our mothers, we're using DoorDash to help deliver some gifts to mom. Moms are a gift, so give her the best this Mother's Day. You can get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. You can select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech, to self-care essentials, and more, delivered right to her door. This Mother's Day, if you get something, you should get something thoughtful for a mom on DoorDash. You can surprise her from wherever you are, whether you're in Chicago for the combine or at home. Again, with bouquets, tech, gift cards, anything like that, DoorDash delivers. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code, and this is all one word, Locked On NBA. So like the Locked On NBA show. That's Locked On NBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. So back here, my name is Richard Stayman. I'm with Leif Thulin. We've been talking about some of these wings. But first, actually, let me tell you real quick, just plugging the Locked On Sports today real fast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire Out Channels TV app. I listen to Locked On Sports TV, the Locked On Sports, just in general, the network. I listen to that almost every day coming to work. It really catches me up. Highly recommend it. It's quick, and like they said, it's local, like I said, it's local touch. I think it's really powerful. Moving on to the wings though. So I'm just gonna kind of give this away. We're going to talk about both my favorite on this list and my least favorite on this list back to back. So let's start with my favorite, Jaylen Tyson, who I just moved up to 15. Do you see him more as a high ceiling or high floor player?
High floor. I don't think he's got the juice in the sense of as an athlete or as a shooter to make himself a high floor guy. I mean, a high ceiling guy, because I think you just have to be that good to be a high ceiling guy and push the limits. But I think his floor is really high, and he's actually someone that I've had first round for the entirety of the college basketball season, and I think you've actually surpassed me as maybe the highest person on him. I had him top 20 for every bit of the season. Right now, he's about 22 for me. I had the 15 through 20 on my board. 25 is really close, but I think his floor is so appealing because when he's played different roles, he's thrived at different things. When he played at Texas and Texas Tech, though he played sparingly in one of those stops, he was an athlete, a wing defender who gets out in transition, finishes in transition. At Cal, he was on the ball all the time, shot very well, which was, I think, the most impressive thing. Despite his heavy workload, his efficiency didn't suffer. He's able to make passing reads. He rebounds well. And I think he meant more to his team than anyone else in the Pac-12. And so I think if you scale him down, he's someone who can knock down an open jump shot, handle the ball, and he can switch defensively. And that's what you're looking for in the later stage of the first round.
Yeah, I actually really like Jaylen Tyson. So Leif hinted at it. I'm still not as high on him as I know one person higher. And I'm not trying to do it for that reason. It's just the way I do it with my boards. I very much prioritize, okay, the top 15 players should be players, a combination of upside swings that I really do think are achievable. I take it very literally. And then also the 15 players who I'm like, these guys are going to stick one way or another, whether it's a high floor, some of those guys get in there. So like Isaiah Collier, I think is somebody that has a pretty good floor to be a backup point guard for a long time, like a Tyus Jones level career, top 15. So I moved Tyson to 15 just because I see just an all-around wing game. And honestly, if you're an all-around wing that has experience as a first option, I actually see a really high ceiling. Some background for Jaylen Tyson, because you're probably wondering, this always comes up whenever I talk highly of Jaylen Tyson, is why was he at 3 schools in 3 years? And it's actually a very simple story. So I'm from Dallas. I've talked to people, both his trainer as well as people who have played basketball with him, like from when he was younger, and that knew him in high school, that played with him in high school, like on the same AAU team, all of that. So from what I've gathered, it's this. Essentially, he was going to Texas Tech to follow Chris Beard, or to be committed to Chris Beard. Chris Beard flipped to Texas. He said, hey, come to Texas. I'll make you a key part of this rotation. Lo and behold, he barely played. He was fed up. So he goes, I'm going to go back to Texas Tech where I was originally committed. That was last year now. So he plays at Texas Tech last year, plays a decent amount, shows his skill. I think don't forget, he's a top 40 recruit. He thrives. Then Mark Adams turned out to say a bunch of racist things, and a lot of it was to Jaylen Tyson. He transferred out from a toxic coach. Like, two very realistic reasons, very justifiable reasons to leave, like, two places. So I don't think he's your average, like, you see some guys just hop and hop and hop. There's a guy that's transferring from West Virginia this year that is about to be on his 4th school in 5 years. Like, it's not like that. This is very much like he has reason to leave. California, the reason they lost, they're in year 1 of a rebuild with a new coach. Like, it's that simple. It's not his fault. You look at the roster around him, the guard play was poor. The bigs weren't very, I think they really only had one big. It's tough.
I think they overachieved, frankly.
Exactly. And a big part of that is Jaylen Tyson. Like, I feel like when you look at a wing that can dominate in the pick and roll, one day I think he really fits that bill. He's such a quick decision maker. We talked about Jamir Watkins, quick decision making off the dribble. I think Jaylen Tyson has actually a very high ceiling. And I really do think if you were to gamble on somebody saying, like, okay, this guy's like a Desmond Bain in the class, where we're all putting him lower because of some, whatever it is. Some people do the multiple schools. They just don't think the shooting's real. Whatever it is, he's this guy where he already has all these skills. He just has to master it. And I know he's a hard worker too. I've seen that up close. I fully buy into him. That was a mouthful, so I'll let you get some words in too.
I mean, I like Tyson. I've liked him all year. I think his best attribute is the fact that he can do well in different situations. I really value that. As I talked about this with Baylor Shireman many times, and I compared them early. I think it was a January 1st or 2nd. Rafael Barlowe and I did an episode about underrated wings who I think will be first rounders. It was Jaylen Tyson and Baylor Shireman. I'm fully still on that train, and I expect them to be. My theory is that both of them have thrived as one of the stars as well as a role player, and that's the way to become a really good role player in the NBA. So I like him, and I'll switch to the guy that I know you don't like, and it's a funny journey for me. It's Ryan Dunn from Virginia. I think he's easily the best defender in the class. And this is funny to say, but I did an episode about the upcoming sophomores last year after the draft. It's like, okay, who's going to be a returner that breaks out? And I was like, Rafael, I got this guy. I heard from these guys at Virginia. He's really, really good. I'm going to put Ryan Dunn in my top 15 coming back. And no one knew who he was. It was kind of a weird topic. And then all of a sudden the season starts and he's in the lottery, and I was like, oh man, maybe I'm too low. But then I watched and I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not missing anything. He's really struggling to shoot, and he's only impacting the game on one side. But Virginia really makes your stats a lot worse because they play at such a slow pace. I think he could thrive in transition. And then I watched the NBA playoffs. I watched Peyton Watson. I watched Jaden McDaniels. And I watch all these guys that are defensively oriented and asked just to be hounds defensively, impact the game in your spot minutes played. And I've told myself, well, if he's implemented correctly and he's able to do what he can do, he's got one of the most rare traits in the class. And if it's already considered a weak class, you might as well swing and take a guy who can influence the stretches and periods when he's in the basketball game, which is not going to be always. And you're going to have to use him in special circumstances, but he's a defensive monster. He's 6'8". He averages 2.5 blocks per game as a small forward. As the rim protector, his steal numbers are off the charts as well. And this, like I said, is against a team that plays a pack line and slows you down. So his numbers are deflated as opposed to inflated by pace. And he also plays in a system that doesn't prioritize gambling. So I think if you were to put him as someone who can hound the ball, be a secondary rim protector, and come in off the bench and guard the best scorers for the opposing units, you may get more value than just about anyone in this range of the draft should he hit.
Yeah, I think my holdback, I have two things. One, first, just shout out to Leif because he 2 years ago, what was it, 3 years ago, something like that. This is the inception of the show. Leif wasn't even on Locked On yet. I had him on as a guest. If you just want Virginia guys that are transferring in, Leif knows all about him. Like before the season called Trey Murphy as the breakout guy. What was it, 2021, I think?
Yeah, I think that was my very first episode, actually. I remember this. It was about 4 games into the season. I said, if you want a sleeper guy, there's this guy from Virginia named Trey Murphy who hit 6 threes against Towson. He looks like a pretty good athlete to me. So that was a pretty lucky one, but I'm dead set on that.
No, he knew what he was talking about. But with Ryan Dunn, my concern is this. Matisse Thybulle is struggling to get, like, he is everywhere. He's really just in Portland. He got some minutes in Philly, but in Portland, he especially struggled to find ways onto the floor. I really worry about guys that are defensive first because you can only have one non-floor spacer, and they better be 6'8", 6'9", or sorry, really 6'10" plus to really, really negate their lack of shooting. Like, he's a good cutter, but if he moves, every single person is going to collapse to the paint because they know what he wants to do. My concern really stems from watching the Oklahoma City Thunder before Kevin Durant left, like the mid-2010s, where Andre Roberson was just left wide open, shot after shot, shot after shot. And that eventually did cost them a lot of offensive possessions, and that hurts in the playoffs. So if he even is like just saying getting to that point where we're talking about the playoffs with him, I worry about, like, can you even play him in the playoffs?
So. Let me make one counter before we move on. I would say Roberson's shot was one of the worst form-wise that we've seen in past 20 years.
Fair.
Dunn's shot doesn't look bad. And I've heard him interview saying, like, I used to be a spot-up shooter and I've just lost confidence. And I think that, yes, he's probably losing confidence as a shooter, probably doesn't bode well, but the shot form looks fine. That's fixable. Yes, his free throw percentage is bad. Like, he's narrowly above 50%, and he shot a little bit over 20% this year. It's from 3, that is. But so I'm fully aware he's not a good shooter, but it's not like this herky-jerky, horrible thing. Like, we last year, Richard and I, from experience, and we said this on a podcast, thought that Dylan Mitchell, based on making 1 3, might be able to play as well into the first round if he didn't play the next day, and then he continued to shoot terribly. Now, what's to say Dunn hits a 3, doesn't play the next day at the combine? Obviously, I know it's not how it's going to work this year. It doesn't illuminate some teams, say, like, oh my gosh, that's Peyton Watson. Watson's not a good shooter. He averaged 4 per game in college. Like, now McDaniel shot terribly. He had more of a package to score in high school, so that was less of a concern. But there's plenty of players that have an archetype that they're being impactful. Like, even Luguentz Dort, different body type. But Dort was a terrible shooter early in his career, and he's developed into a must-play player, and he's improved his shot. So I just think that there's a pathway, even if it's a slim one, that his ceiling's higher than most people you'd be picking 15 to 30.
Yeah, I think we see differently on this one, but we got to get to some other guys. Let me tell you about FanDuel before we hit this final stretch. of three guys. So it's playoff time right now in the NBA. As we're recording this, the Pelicans just got eliminated. The NBA, NHL, both their playoffs are going on. And I know both of us are baseball fans. Baseball's also underway. Or actually, it's in full swing, dare I say. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs and slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's round this out, Leif. Let's start up with Tristan da Silva, somebody I think both of us like a lot. You want to give the intro on this?
Sure. Tristan da Silva is a guy who's been on the radar for a while, but his roles quietly shifted year to year at Colorado. This year, he played alongside Cody Williams, who was the main attraction for scouts, but also KJ Simpson, who was the first team All Pac 12 performer at point guard. And da Silva can play as one of the star players, and he can play as a co star or a tertiary option. And I think he displayed exactly what scouts want to see from him. I see him, and this is an on the cuff comparison. I see him a bit like George Niang at the NBA level, someone who shoots the threes, isn't overwhelmingly athletic, is very skilled, can play the three or the four. I think he's a better athlete than Niang, but he can really shoot the ball, and he's a heady cutter. Like, he knows where to be on the floor. He makes crafty passes, cuts well, and will compete defensively. Not going to be an impressive, like, this is the guy stopper, but his shooting and his intangibles will keep him on the basketball court.
Yeah, I really liked Tristan da Silva last year. I saw him on one ankle pretty much at the combine. Leaf had just left, and Excel was doing their pro day, and I saw him still putting up a ton of good shots. Like, he is all of 6'8". I think with him, I had said this last year, and I think it's actually become more true as he's added more ball skills. Scout him as a shooter first, and you see a whole different prospect. Like, he is his first and primary role on offense should be jump shooting and spotting up. The big thing with him is, okay, say that the spot up is gone, he's not lost. Like, that's a huge trait for shooters to have. He has really good ball skills. Like Leif said, he developed in that area where he added the passing. Like, I think he really learned to pass on the drive this year. Still not sold on the defense, but I really do like his game. I have him top 25. So where do you have him?
It's a great question. I have him in that same vicinity. I've got da Silva at 30 right now. I think I'll likely move him up, but I have him at 30 right now, alongside some guys that are younger and I think have more upside. But I think if I'm drafting the way the NBA is trending right now, you want to take the older player because he's more ready to contribute for winning teams. So I think da Silva will be picked higher than where I have him right now.
Yeah, I think he's going to add a lot of value to playoff teams. The next one is actually far and away. This guy fits the bill to a T of these just unique misfit wings, right? This is Seion James. He's at Tulane. I haven't seen any hype around him. I personally am a big fan. Extremely smart basketball player. Like, just unbelievably, he gets everything when I watch. One of the top things I do is, and almost everybody probably does this when scouting, but like, one of the things you should do is pause as soon as they're about to make a decision and go, okay, like, you have almost a bird's eye view. Like, you have a third person view, right? So you can see what should they do? Where's the opening most of the time? And every single time I'm like, okay, there's a corner shooter open. There's the cutters open, whatever he should shoot, whatever it is, almost every single time he makes that proper decision. And it's beautiful. Like, I think that really checks out. And it shows in the stat sheet. The only issue is I've talked to people who say like the advanced stats really hurt him. And that's where all that damage is going to be done as a senior. He just never really popped off on that. But the jump shot really comes and goes. The 3-point percentage improved. The free throw percentage still hovers around 70. It's just not promising enough. But he's ridiculously athletic. Can guard, really, he played the 5 a good amount. But I think he's more destined to guard 1 through 4. And he can also pass. He can spot up. He's hit moving jump shots. I think the touch is there. I think it's just the numbers are lagging. If he hits, I think he's a rotation player that just does everything. What are your thoughts on Seion?
I don't know as much about him as you do, but my big takeaway was the shot. I have doubts with the shot, and he's not as big of a guy as some of these players that we're discussing in terms of their defensive potential. Like Jamir Watkins and Ryan Dunn, to me, are NBA level athletes masquerading as college basketball players. Like they're
Fair.
freak athletes defensively, and both of them make life miserable for the other players. James is a really good athlete, but he just doesn't have the length that you can impose your will on some inferior athletes the way the others do. The other thing about James is, like I said, his shot looks a little strange to me, like just like visibly, but also percentage you can find ebbs and flows. And then the one thing I would say, this has less to do with him, but more about college basketball. Tulane played a gimmicky brand of basketball, and I typically have reservation about teams that play gimmicky styles, especially what I'd consider mid-major. Yes, I know the Americans much improved, but it's still a lower level of basketball than some of these other players. So the fact that they're playing gimmicky basketball in a lower level it makes me a little concerned. Do you think that's a fair thing, or is it just player to player?
I think it can be player to player, but real quick, describe what you mean by gimmicky basketball for those who don't know.
Like Tulane plays a style in which they isolate their big guy, often Kevin Cross, and then they empty out the wings and play 1-4 flats a lot, and then let him create a shot for himself or others, and they attack closeouts that are often from the corners or the wings, and it's typically out of, okay, James or Kevin Cross has shot a lot of push shots. Now let's make him kick it out into these not great shooters. Let's see if they knock down a shot. Now, if they knock down a shot, let's race out at them. So it makes the other teams make a lot of decisions. Tulane was a weird basketball team in general, and I think defensively they played a little bit of like feast or famine defense, where they get a lot of steals or they play kind of very patient and calm basketball. I thought they were not a great coached basketball team from Ron Hunter. Granted, he missed some games, and so he was trying to be a little too clever at times, in my opinion.
Fair. I think that's a good overview on Seion. Last guy, Johnny Furphy from Kansas. I'll start with him. I think he's outstanding shooter. I think he generally is a pretty smart player. That's it. That's pretty much the person. He's big. He shoots. Pretty smart. Understands the game. Extremely just absolute negative on defense. That's really where it hurts. His defense is rough. He can't really recover. He's not much of a playmaker. Like, he is one dimensional. So that's my reservation. I think the size and shot could put him in the league, but one dimensional stuff in today's NBA.
I actually like Furphy. I think Furphy is a raw developing player. Like, I don't think in most years he would have played for Bill Self's team. I think he was forced into action and at times thrived. Was dared to be, and I'm not saying it dared to be the shooter by the other team. He was told he had to be the shooter for Kansas because Nick Timberlake couldn't shoot this year. Elmarco Jackson was never a good shooter. I think they honestly wanted Arterio Morris to be their scorer, but he got in legal issues, to say the least. And then Kevin McCullough is not a good shooter. So what Furphy had, and he was injured. So Furphy had to go to these uncomfortable lengths to make Kansas better and not just fit in. And I think he could be a better fit with less pressure. And then I watched him play from the third row at March Madness, and he's a true 6'9". He's long, he's lanky, he's very, very thin. I think there's a lot of physical development that his body can have that not all these other younger players have. Some of them are mostly grown, and you say, well, they're young. Well, he's really young, and he looks it. So I have more faith that, hey, he shot this well at times for a team like Kansas in the best defensive league in the country in the Big 12. He rebounds the ball. He sticks his nose in there and rebounds. He's in the right places defensively. And most of his deficiencies, to me, are maturation related. So I have actually a decent amount of faith in Johnny Furphy.
Yeah, that's fair. It really comes down to, for me, just how good that shot is. Well, this has been a great episode of some very unique wings. We went over Dylan Jones, Jamir Watkins, Jaylen Tyson, Ryan Dunn, Tristan da Silva, Seion James, and Johnny Furphy. Give Leif a follow. He is fantastic at Leif Thulin. It's right there on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening via podcast, it's just Leif Thulin. Look him up. You can easily find him, LeifThulin. Really appreciate everybody listening. Like I said earlier, go ahead and check out Locked On Sports today. You don't have to listen to any yelling or turn down the volume, anything like that. It's free on Amazon Fire TV. Go check that out. But thank you so much, and we will be back with ranking more weird positional players, I'm sure, in the future. Have a good one.